Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you here today for our AI in Public Service event. This is the third event in our series, Data Horizons, where we've gone through data in the healthcare industry on Monday. Then on Tuesday, we did data and AI in consumer goods with PepsiCo and took a little break on Wednesday. So we're happy to be back here today with the Deloitte team to discuss AI and public service. And we have such a great event in store for us talking about generative AI and trustworthy AI. So really looking forward to this conversation. We'd love to know where everyone is joining from. I am joining from California. So it's still morning time here. I just refilled on my extra cup of coffee. So I'm ready and alert and excited for everyone's questions, but definitely let us know where you're joining from in the chat. Welcome, Kimberly from Brooklyn. We were just talking about the weather and air pollution in Brooklyn. So I hope you're okay. I'm hoping you're staying inside. You have a good air filter and are feeling okay there. Welcome, Sylvie from Greensboro, North Carolina. Uh, Joining from Manchester, UK. Great. So excited to have you. Detroit, Michigan. Welcome, everybody. Well, as everybody joins in, we will go ahead and get started. So my name is Sadie St. Lawrence. I am the founder and CEO of Women in Data, and I'm so excited to have everyone here today. If this is your first Women in Data event, we want to say welcome. We are so excited that you are here and part of our community. Women in Data mission is to increase diversity in data careers. And we are a community of data practitioners, data citizens, data leaders, and have representation in over 60 cities across 55 countries. So if this is your first event, welcome. We are happy to have you here. If you are a Women in Data member, welcome back. It's always good to have members coming back and being a part of our community. And we want to thank you for showing up here today. Again, if this is your first event, there are a number of ways to get involved in Women in Data, but most importantly, in our community, we like to say that all are welcome. We really value sharing knowledge and have informational sessions such as these webinars. There's lots of opportunities to learn through our learning pathways, our data curiosity program, our datathons. And while you're going on that learning experience, one of our values is to cheer each other on and encourage each other wherever you're at in your career, whether you're the chief data officer of an organization or you're just looking to transition into your career. We are here to support one another and cheer each other on in this industry. And as we do that, we like to stay accountable not only to ourselves, but to others in the industry, as we know that working with data comes with a lot of responsibility, whether that be through privacy and security, and as we'll talk about today, ethical considerations as we implement and use some of these algorithms. So we like to hold ourselves accountable. But last but not least, we lead and we create other opportunities for others to lead. So again, we encourage you to get involved, whether that's through checking out our jobs board, getting connected with one of our local chapters. If you currently work in government, I encourage you to check out our U.S. federal government chapter or our state of California government chapter. We have over 60 chapters, so lots of opportunities for you to get involved. Again, if you are a Women in Data member, thank you for being a member and for showing up today. We appreciate everyone who is here and supporting the mission to continue to increase diversity in data careers. So without further ado, I am so excited to introduce our two speakers today. We have two fantastic kind of lightning talk sessions that I think will really blend and go nicely into each other. So our first session is going to be on generative AI in government. And I'm happy to introduce Kara Busath, who will be leading this session. So Kara, welcome. And thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk with you. I am a total data nerd. My background is in statistics, so this is right up my alley and things I love doing. Generative AI in government. Very interesting topic, very lightning rod topic right now. Unless you've been under a rock somewhere, this is all over the news. Chat GPT, um, not anything with that, open AI, all that good stuff is going on. There's a lot of interest for this in the government side as well. As you can see, recent news, like the White House is very much interested in Chat GPT and other generative AI platforms. And they're actually going to be holding a conference in August to figure out how do we do this and how do we move forward doing this ethically and all the risks and considerations that need to come along with it, um, along with the great capabilities and great things that we can get coming out of generative AI to help revolutionize what we're doing from a government perspective. Um, Talking through today, I just wanted to go a little bit over kind of what is generative AI. Let's talk through like kind of how it works a little bit. Talk about some of the risks and considerations, which Vinita will go into a little bit later when we're talking about trustworthy AI and how you take those risks and considerations into when you're coding and what you're doing with AI. And then kind of where we see these role plays cases playing out in the government space and how it can be used. So like, what is generative AI? Right. So this is where you are using models, you're using AI to create original content. This can come from a variety of shapes and forces. It could be you're creating code, it could be you're creating text, create audio, you can create images, things that usually took a lot of the human skill, took a lot of time for human beings to actually sit down in front of a computer or, pick a paintbrush and, do this themselves. It's now that we're seeing that AI has the capability to do it. It's built on obviously models, right? There's a lot of technology that are out there that could be used. OpenAI is just one that you can use. You can consider the GPT-3. There's also GPT-4 out, right? Like every day it's changing. NVIDIA is a big player in the market as well. So it's these models that are taking in vast amounts of information, of data, and they're performing calculations on them to help you come out with that content. Why are we seeing this now in the workplace? Why are we seeing this big hullabaloo about it? It's really revolutionized what we're doing. We have this perfect convergence of we have the software and the capability to do it. We have the data, vast amounts of data that can help build these large language models. It's a lot of innovations that have occurred in the marketplace that have allowed this to be the hot topic right now. Basically, everybody that's a big player in the market is technology startups are out there trying to get on top of how do we handle and tackle generative AI and how we can use it and how we can get a space in the market. Industry impact, there's a lot that could be done with generative AI, and it's going to have a huge impact on the industry, and it's going to have a huge impact on government as well. How we use this to do things better, faster, smarter, things that took humans a lot longer. Now the AI can do it in a lot less time. So thinking about it, and we'll go into a little bit more. But like thinking through like some of the things you can do, it can take a picture and it can tell you what is in the picture. It could take a huge document. I'm in the accounting and control space, so I'm dealing with like audits and those types of things. So I can take a process document and process narrative, and I can ask generative AI to look at that document and pull out key controls for me. Hundreds of page documents, it can pull that out in a couple minutes versus me having to scan through that myself and try to pick them out. You can actually ask it to create a picture of a teddy bear, like it says there. Interesting for what I use a lot of times in my work is the coding aspect as well. It can take some of your code that you're writing, it can evaluate it, and it can tell you, hey, how can you make your code better? Or how can you make it more compact? How can you streamline it, make it more efficient? So I use that a lot also when I do my coding, just to do a sanity check and be like, how can I do this better and be better and faster with what I'm doing? So what we're seeing some of the capabilities are coming out around it. In the government space, I'm seeing a lot of these, right? Especially the text and the code. A lot of government interest around this, with how we can take legislation, how we can take policies, regulations, things that are complex technical documents, and we can condense these down and make it more manageable for our government personnel to actually know what's in them and pull out the information that they need. You can also do, image and video analysis. So really interesting things that you can take a picture of a building and you can do an impact assessment on, hey, maybe we need to do repairs on this building. Maybe we need to do maintenance on it. Or, hey, how do we do the depreciation for this asset that we're looking at? And again, from a very accounting specific background, but lots of applications that could be done from this. Um, where I wanted to talk about a little bit is thinking through some of the risks, the limitations, the considerations that come with generative AI. Um, Very exciting tool to use, but we also have to be aware of what the impact is and just be cautious and careful when we're taking AI and we're putting it into the workplace and making sure that we're not introducing bias into our models. Um, so like consideration is the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, the government department is doing analysis on loans for mortgage owners. And a lot of times some of that data is inherently biased just because the people that were doing these loans maybe have been biased themselves. So if your data has that inherent bias from what is going in, your models themselves could be biased as well. So having to take into that consideration of, hey, looking at our model, are we introducing something that we didn't think we were going to do? Um, Thinking through the cost of it, like when you're doing a model, like how do we take into consideration the return on investment? Does it make sense to, you know, run through a lot of, spend a lot of money to develop this generative AI, but maybe it's the impact isn't that significant in terms of the dollar amounts that were spent building it. The ethical use, I think this one is a really interesting topic. Is it, at least you see the question there, is it being used in a manner consistent with the purpose of the overall exercise? So this is where we're thinking through, does this model introduce things that we did not take into consideration? Is it actually approaching the problem in the way we want it to be? I think it also thinks through, maybe we're doing something and it's going to cut a job. There's ethical things to think about and considerations there too. I'm not saying don't use AI, but just things that you have to take into consideration. Hallucination. This is a really one that your model is so convinced that the answer it's giving you is the actual truth, but it's not the truth, but it's providing you information and saying this is true when in fact it is. So it's like hallucinating what the actual truth is and trying to convince you of what it is. The model performance. So how do you walk through, you create a model once, you can't just leave it for the rest of the life of your program. You can't leave it for the rest of the life of this model. You actually have to consider, like, do we have to keep retraining it? Do we have to take into considerations? Are we losing the precision that we've had before? Then maybe we need to take that model and retrain it and take new parameters in there, new features, and figure out what we want to do with it. Privacy is a huge one, right? So we have data out there. How are we using people's data? Are they aware that we're using their data? What are some, again, the ethical considerations of using people's data that they're not aware of? I'm not going to read everything here for you. You're all very smart. That's why you're here. You're interested in this. But just thinking through, there's some considerations to think about. So talking through, what are some of the mechanics of generative AI? We see at the top of this, the iceberg, the shiny chat GPT output that comes from what we're doing. But there's a whole lot of things that go below the surface of the iceberg, right? So we have the beginning at the bottom. It's built really on this computing power, this capabilities that are built by industry like Google, NVIDIA, OpenAI, a lot of other players in there. So we have to have that computing power. You have to have the data, right? Making sure you have a sufficient worth of data to be able to train your model and test your model is really important. So you're not, overtraining your model. You're not undertraining your model. You are not introducing bias into that model that you didn't intend to be in there. And then there's a lot of the different types of models that you can actually use to help create your outcome. Yeah, how to create what, help you solve your business solution. So GPT-3 is one example of a foundational model, right? So it's specifically a large language model that uses deep learning to help analyze it. I'm not going to read it spell for you, but just lots of foundational models that are out there for you to help create your capabilities, help to analyze and train your data, and help you make the predictions. And, the key terms on the sides are things that you can use as you're getting into generative AI, kind of understanding what they mean. So really, I want to kind of spend a little bit more time is really talking about where do we see this playing out in the government space? Where do we see the use cases coming from this? And these are some of the, probably maybe like we'll call it 5 main buckets where I kind of see these things playing out in the government space of where they're thinking of where they want to use generative AI. So first is report generation. So really thinking through the number of, if you've ever worked in accounting or anything, just the vast amounts of reports that have to be created, that people have to type up, that people have to write, especially in the government side, audit reports, they have to do annual financial reporting, lots of reports that have to do it. And just having the ability to have Gen AI create those reports for you as an initial point, and then you can go through and read and correct and add in the human aspect where it's needed, allows government employees to focus on other areas that are more important, to be honest, where they can use more, where humans are better at thinking through these skills than what we are seeing people type out right now, right? So case management, right? So this is thinking through, I see this especially in the federal health sector, but also thinking through AI that can help you parse through different case files, and that, different POs, different invoices, things that you can see it that helps you prioritize and maximize the impact. And then the government employee can take over at that point and say, okay, this is the maximum ones. These are the highest risk values. Let's start with these ones, and then we'll work our way down. Knowledge management. So just being able to find out the connections between different documents, find out the connections between different policies, being able to cluster, being able to group those transactions, that data points, and making them into a cohesive point of view that someone could take and figure out, okay, this is how it all connects together. This is how we do it. This could be from text. This could be from video. As I said, could send drones out to different buildings, different areas, just to figure out what is out there and help make those connections between what we're seeing from those data points. I see a lot of emphasis and a lot of interest in the back office space. So a lot of times what I've seen, in the past is a government employee is spending time doing manual transactions, trying to correct an invoice in the system, or, trying to correct a purchase order in the system, or, doing a lot of just manual time consuming tasks. And this is really where I see generative AI making a huge impact on government right now. So having some sort of model, some sort of application that can go through and take care of a lot of those manual repetitive tasks, and just freeing up their time to make more, spend more time on the value add, making decisions, looking at outcomes and trying to figure out, hey, what's the most appropriate way to proceed forward? How do we figure out, where we want to spend our money? How do we want to budget? How do we, make those more decisions that humans are much better at making than, computer models are. And then customer engagement, we're also seeing this as well. So having like chatbots or other things that make government services more user friendly. If you've ever had to call the IRS, or, if you're a veteran and you've ever had to deal with the VA, sometimes it can be very time consuming and painful to deal with, trying to get a hold of an actual person to try and figure out, to talk to them and figure out what's going on. So chatbots are a really great way to create that customer satisfaction and increase the ability to get answers of what we need from the government. All right. And then this is the last slide, and I'll let you ask any questions. So, I'll let you give you a depth by PowerPoint, but really these are some where we see a lot of things coming out from like the government space. So like communication reporting, human resources, so HR, lot of capabilities. We're seeing this playing out, how we can have personal onboarding assistants, people doing AI maybe doing a termination process, compensation analysis. It can go through, evaluate resumes and help you make those hiring decisions. Contracting and reporting could be very complicated, trying to read through several pages of dense legal language that could be in contracts. So having something that can parse through that language and simplify it for you, very helpful. Working around fraud detection and prevention. So especially in the federal healthcare space, how the government is spending its money and claims that are coming through, making sure they're accurate and legitimate claims, and other payments that come through as well, making sure they are legitimate and they should be paid out. Yeah, I mean, information technology, also seeing a lot of space in that around like, how do we test internal controls on documents? How do we test internal controls on computer systems? And creating code across multiple segments of financial systems and ERPs. So like, how do we do system modernization? How do we take into consideration when we're moving from one system to another? How do we make sure all the data is transferring over? Yeah, and I would say I'm not gonna read them all. So, but I hope this gets you a little bit excited about where we see generative AI coming in the future, where we see this playing out in the government space. I'm very excited to see what's going on. And I'm, involved in helping develop generative AI and how we're going to take it to our government clients and how we can use it there. So with that, and that's the end of mine, but Sadie, I'm going to turn it over to you, but we're doing a Q&A. Sadie will keep me honest.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Kara. Lots of great stuff here. And we have a few questions coming in. One from Kimberly. She's asking what your thoughts are on how to increase the use of generative AI in government for the provision of healthcare and citizen-based services. And so I know that slide at the end touched on some of these, but I think in particular she's looking at like safety and privacy. And do you foresee like new consumer protection laws for citizens needing to own their data based on this new technology as well? So kind of two-part, like how do you see this being used in healthcare, and then what needs to change in terms of consumer protection laws as well?
Yeah. So I think, so for the first one, like healthcare, I've seen it. Obviously, we talked a little bit about fraud prevention, right? But I've also seen it in terms of like natural language processing. So looking at maybe patients are submitting, I'm having pain in my chest, or I have these pain and, in my arm, or how do you take that text and figure out, okay, how really significant is the injury? How do we help them figure out the proper care that they need to be receiving based on these text prompts? It's really interesting because they do like clustering and grouping up together to draw these connections, being like, hey, this person had similar things. Maybe this person has the same thing, right? So I see it playing out there. And, it's still evolving every day. But the second point you talked about, like data considerations, consumer privacy laws, I definitely see that there will be more laws and regulations coming down the road around this. Because what I talked about, right? Like data privacy, it's huge. It's huge. Like people don't want their personal information out there for anybody to use. And that's what a lot of these open AI sources are doing right now. So it's ChatGPT, right? Like you got to figure anything that you're putting out there, anybody can see. So how do you, protect your own personal data is important. I see definitely laws coming down to make sure we're taking that into consideration.
And then another question here is how can we build in code and fact checking? Are these resources available to developers to fact check some of this content with generative sources? So, for example, like with Google Bard or academic citations. So, I think this audience understands that a lot of the large language models are just predicting the next word, which is great.
Yeah.
But does that actually mean that next word is true? And how do we fact check some of these models?
Right. And that's where like the human part comes into, right? Like, and I tell this to the teams I work with. You can't just take a model and say like, oh, the code ran, so therefore the output is correct. Right. You have to do some knowledge, so check, some sensing, some thinking through it. I definitely had situations where I used it to help write some like code for a proposal, some language. And at the surface, if you weren't looking at it, you're like, oh, this is great. And then when you think about it, you're like, wait, no, this isn't correct, right? So it's having to do with that human check yourself, like evaluating the model, evaluating the precision that's coming out of it, evaluating um, the results you're getting and doing those logical checks, right? And I think you can bounce them off other platforms as well. Like if you're doing Bard, maybe try to open, AI, chat GPT, see where you get there. Are they consistent? Um, but some of it is going to have to be that human check where we're better at those things than the Gen AI.
Well, thank you again, Kara, for coming in and speaking to us. It definitely is an exciting time. I mean, just even that last slide with all of the use cases and opportunity. What a great time to be working in AI, but also working in government where we have that direct impact to citizens as well. So thank you for coming on and sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Um, I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, Vinita, as she will be sharing some insights now. Not only, I think it was perfect setup, Kara, in terms of what we can do with all of this, but now to have Vinita share, how do we make sure that it's trustworthy? And we can see some of the questions already leading into that. So, Vinita, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you so you can talk to us about how we make sure that we're implementing this in a safe and trustworthy aspect.
Thank you, Sadie, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about such an important topic. I live and breathe this at Deloitte, so this is really a great opportunity. So, good morning and good afternoon, depending on the time zone that you all are in. I'm a specialist leader at Deloitte, focusing on artificial intelligence solutions within the government and public sector. My background is national security and accelerating the adoption and application of emerging and disruptive technologies to solve mission problems. And it's funny as I was just thinking about some interesting use cases as Kara was discussing generative AI, and I've seen folks use Chat GPT or other types of tools, and some interesting stories like around planning gardens or helping organize your computer desktop, or and ideas on keeping your toddler busy, which resonates with me personally. And just as an aside, I thought it would be interesting for the audience, if you guys, it would be interesting for me to see the audience of if you guys have used this, what are some interesting use cases that you've used it for? Just to kind of see through and share that information and share ideas. Um, but when thinking about how we take advantage of disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence, it's equally important to think about the challenges introduced by that technology as much as it is to think about the opportunities gained from its use. And I think that that was a lot of one of the themes that Kara talked about as well when we think about generative AI. And so today, the focus of my discussion on trustworthy AI will be addressing those challenges, expanding on Kara's discussions of ethical and responsible considerations. So why should we be thinking about trustworthiness across the AI lifecycle? What Deloitte's trustworthy AI framework actually is and what our approach to that is, and how do we operationalize such an approach so that we can increase confidence in AI at scale while still managing risk. So, and during the intro, Stady used the term data citizens. I think it's important to say that trustworthy AI is of community interest. It's an important facet for all of those who are part of the AI, data industry, and other digital domains. So going back to that topic of generative AI a bit, because large language models like Chat GPT are trained broadly on information scraped from the internet, there is that danger of this information containing historical and representation biases. So to mitigate such biases, one can employ fairness techniques as part of the trustworthy AI framework to develop filters and human feedback loops that can reduce the negative impact from bias in large language models as one of the facets of it. Additionally, it's important to evaluate how the output of the model will be used to mitigate potential harm, going back to we as humans need to check that information and make sure it sounds right. So that's a quick example of what I mean by the challenges that are introduced and ways to employ trustworthy AI to address them. I'm going to share my screen just really quick for you all to go through and show you the the actual screen, the wheel or the trustworthy aspects and the dimensions that we have here. So if you just, let me just share with you. Sorry, for some reason I'm running into issue sharing. So I'll just go through the particular areas themselves and the six dimensions. Um, but the trustworthy AI framework focuses on six key dimensions. So to help organizations develop safeguards across the AI lifecycle. So the dimensions are fairness and impartiality, transparency and explainability. So previously, some of the questions that Kara was fielding was around like how do we know from the data sources and the information, and can we trust that? And the responsibility and accountability associated with the outcomes themselves, the safety and security around it. And the robustness and reliability. Is the model performing the way we assumed it's going to be performing? And then privacy, right? So as we cut across all these different industries, consumer privacy, individual privacies, and different aspects of it. That's a big piece of this as well. So, by employing this type of approach, organizations are able to develop AI governance and regulatory compliance throughout the life cycle and evolve how they approach the compliance activities as those regulations evolve and mature as well. So, AI is a broadening industry. People are starting to understand it more and more. Government is starting to understand it more and more. And we're going to see more of these kind of, I think, complexities around the types of requirements and standards that we're looking for from a government standpoint that we're going to have to make sure that we're addressing. Thus, we're buying down the risk and increasing the confidence in the model efficacy. So we see needs for using the trustworthy AI framework, as I mentioned earlier, across all industries globally. So more and more government agencies are looking to provide some sort of guardrails or guidance in the realm of AI to address those trustworthy AI challenges. So to name a few recent examples of note, in the past few weeks, the White House has launched new AI initiative focused on research development and deployment of responsible AI. So these initiatives include heavy engagement with the technology sectors and leading industry experts in AI. And so the goal here is to ultimately establish a national artificial intelligence strategy. And another example is when the leaders of the G7 nations met back in May. One of their key agreements was the call for the development and adoption of technical standards to keep artificial intelligence trustworthy. And so this is quick on the heels of the potential legislations from the European Union to regulate AI. And then coming back to the areas domestically in the United States, a couple of years ago, the National Security Commission released their strategy for AI in the national security realm. And so they too address confidence in AI systems, robust and reliability while defending against AI threats. So, with all of these mandates and globally and federally, and frankly within state and local agencies, this is only going to further emphasize the importance of building AI solutions with trustworthy AI baked in from the beginning. Um, and so just using a few key sectors as examples and kind of expanding and reiterating some of the examples that Kara went through, let's take a look at like the health industry. So while this increased use of AI to conduct large scale analyses and reporting is going to provide more accurate diagnoses in areas and better patient care, there are definitely calls from those in the industry to establish standards and guidelines. And this is an effort to promote transparency and trust in AI tools being used to make the decisions. And one of the major reasons is due to potential introduction of bias. So bias can be introduced if data AI systems are trained on is not representative of the population that they will be used to serve. So this can lead to inaccurate or unfair results, particularly in marginalized communities. Expanding on that HUD example, so in the finance sector, similar sorts of concerns and challenges pop up. So understanding AI models are trained on data, which often has historical and representational biases. So consider the credit risk data set. So historically, minority populations in the US have not had the same level of access to credit, which would indicate bias within the data set. that would carry into models trained on it. So by developing and operationalizing standards and guidelines, we can help ensure ethical, unbiased, appropriate use of AI solutions, and where organizations can start to combat the algorithmic bias. So this can be done through the use of fairness validation techniques and model governance in particular. And with model governance, I want to be clear, when I think about it, it's not just about, what the machine presents, right? What the AI solution presents. It's going back to the human aspect of it. Is this right? Does it look right? And if it doesn't, what do we need to do to ensure that it looks right? And so another example is the national security realm. So while not the only AI challenge for this area, topics like adversarial AI are more concerning. Attacks on AI systems range from data poisoning to membership inference to model evasion. Attacks like data poisoning become embedded in computer vision systems, for example. So effectively creating backdoors to future evasion of detection models. And because attacks become baked in, it's important to take inventory of your AI systems and components, including data that make up their supply chains. So it's also important to remain cognizant of the adversarial AI ecosystems as more defensive solutions become commercially available, as people understand more and more what adversarial AI is and what are things we need to do to combat. So now that we've talked about the dimensions of trustworthy AI, we've talked about a few of the key use cases. Let's kind of get into the approach of the trustworthy AI framework to address AI challenges. So as we've talked about, trustworthy AI is a multidimensional framework designed to instill trust in AI ML solutions and enhance model efficacy. And so understanding the framework isn't enough. However, the heart of addressing AI challenges and reducing risk while addressing regulatory compliance is operationalizing it. This area, and I think I said it earlier, is extremely important to me coming from the national security arena, where trust of model outcomes, starting with the data through model deployment and analyses phases, are the utmost importance. And at Deloitte, I've spent much of my time working with subject matter experts to develop solutions that do just that. We've developed Deloitte's model services or trustworthy AI pipeline within the Cortex AI for Government set of solutions to operationalize this trustworthy AI framework. And so by using this framework, agencies at every level of government can develop safeguards across those 6 key dimensions. This is a critical step in managing risk and capitalizing on returns associated with AI. So explainability techniques can transform what has historically been a black box process into a glass box, enabling organizations to transparently monitor models in production and capture a range of metrics and information that can be leveraged in the governance and risk management. These processes significantly enhance state of the art for applying trustworthy AI methodologies in machine learning operational environments or ML ops. And the next part of implementing the framework is setting trustworthy AI policies. So it's important for agencies to recognize that trustworthy AI is not a one size fits all. It needs to be customized for specific use cases and agency mission imperatives. So selecting the trustworthy AI policies to ensure the strategic and compliance mandates of an agency is central to increase confidence in AI solutions and ultimately an agency's decision-making process. And this includes considering what dimensions in the framework mean the most to the particular agency and to establish thresholds for fairness, explainability, and privacy as per their unique needs and objectives. So another central tenet ensuring that models adhere to organizations' policies is working through the stand-up of governance workflows, as I mentioned earlier. And it's important to track machine learning metrics associated with those defined policies throughout the model development lifecycle itself and generate documentation and what we call model cards to prove their models measure up to expectations over time. So this helps ensure that their models are trustworthy, not only at the time of deployment, but throughout their usage. And this tracking and validation supports the idea of continuous model assessments, where the human in the loop is monitoring model performance, model behavior to ensure outcomes make sense. So, in order to put these elements of these approaches in place, we all are also seeing an extension of skill sets. Not only are the data science practitioners key to these evaluations and processes, so are the machine learning engineers, the data engineers, the analysts, and in the case of generative AI, prompt engineers. But in particular, we're seeing the discussion of trustworthy AI analysts, who is the individual or part of the team that oversees the model governance and monitoring process. And while the idea of quality assurance analyst isn't new, the overlay of ensuring trustworthy controls is perhaps an expanded set of responsibilities or scope for some. And so, in addition to the technical experts involved in the development and deployment of the process of AI, it's important to educate and advocate to the non technical teams. And I want to underscore that is advocate to the non technical teams and champions who make those decisions on funding and priorities to ensure they have the knowledge and understanding to make those important investment decisions. Another aspect for agencies to consider when thinking about the tools for trustworthy AI validation, monitoring and governance is to understand that there are commodity solutions out there that already have been developed to help address various parts of the trustworthy AI dimensions. There's certainly tools that have been integrated with commodity ML ops platforms along with applications developed to address specific areas like bias and fairness. Examples being like model services that I mentioned earlier from Deloitte. Additionally, going back to unique needs for agencies, bringing in experts who can help build trustworthy AI tools not readily available should also be a consideration to accelerate the integration of trustworthy AI into the overall AI life cycle of an agency. So, as AI technologies continue to scale, it will be critical for agencies to establish a perspective on model governance and corresponding tools for enhancing AI transparency and identifying and mitigating risks across the data and model life cycles. It will be important to understand the end to end aspects of applying trustworthy AI, from the data monitoring pieces of it through the model monitoring once the model is out in the wild, and the continuous assessments that I mentioned earlier, all in an effort, right, to minimize the risk of potential problems with outcomes impacting decisions making, for example. So, with that being said, I want to thank you for your time. I hope this helped in broadening the understanding of how to address trustworthy AI solutions. I suspect are quite a few questions I think I'm seeing, so happy to go through and answer them as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Vinita. Yeah, a couple questions coming in. One is first in terms of the six dimensions. Are these online and can people find these anywhere?
Yes, I will get you the link and I will put it in the chat. I apologize for I checked the PowerPoint right before we started, and then when I went to put it up, nope. So I'll get the link for you and I'll put it up. Absolutely.
Sounds good. And then another question we have, you mentioned, different government organizations looking to see how we regulate this and how citizens can be involved. What is the best way for people to get involved in some of these initiatives with government? Is there an opportunity for citizens to be involved there?
So I think there are definitely organizations, nonprofit organizations. I saw actually yesterday was really interesting, like the National Science Foundation is starting up an activity around trustworthy AI and in partnership with academia, with companies, industry, et cetera. So we're starting to see a lot of that. I would say keeping a pulse on what's going on from the academic and research institutes as well. I think that with regards to the regulations, I think it's going to be part of how we think about how we influence decision making in the government. This is part of those regulations and it's part of that process.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps us up for today. So again, thank you. I want to say a big thank you to Kara and Vinita for coming on and sharing their insights with us. What an exciting time to be alive and working in this space. And just so encouraging to see leaders like yourself who are taking the thought and care to make sure we're implementing this safely and able to see the positive outcomes we want from this technology. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and wisdom with us. Um, what's the best way for individuals to connect with you, learn more? Is LinkedIn a good place? Can we pop in your LinkedIn profiles in there in the chat? That would be great. So, oh, and thank you for sharing the link to the frameworks as well. So again, thank you everyone for attending. This was a fantastic session, and I look forward to connecting with everybody offline after this. As just one last reminder, we do have one last event tomorrow. And so this will be talking about data and AI in the financial services industry. We have a great group of panelists, so hope to see you all then. But regardless, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.